Hi, in this video, we'll try to understand this passage. Seems to be one of the famous passages on GMAT Club. The passage starts with saying it is an odd but indisputable fact. Okay, so it's an odd fact, which means surprising, not really expected, but indisputable. So it's unexpected, but we are not really going to dispute this fact that this is not even true. Okay, so there is a contrast here. It says unexpected. So one may be willing to sort of doubt this fact, but at the same time, the other is also saying that it's indisputable. So we are not going to dispute this fact. Okay, what is the fact? That the 17th century English women, okay, who are generally regarded as among the forerunners of modern feminism, basically 17th century English women who were feminists. That's what it is trying to say. These women are almost all identified with the royalist side. Okay, so this is an odd fact that these 17th century women who were forerunners of modern feminism, they're almost all identified with the royalist side. This is odd. Okay, I don't really know why this is odd so far. In the conflict, and by the way, if you notice, I took a pause here and I'm taking pauses as I'm reading. I did not I'm not reading this entire sentence in one go. If I do this, I'll also be lost. And this is what I find people doing, that they read such long sentences also in one go. Okay, so when you're reading such a long sentence, it makes a lot of sense to take pauses as you read, assimilate whatever you have read so far, and then move ahead. Okay, so all these women are identified with the royalist side in the conflict between royalists and parliamentarians. Okay, so there is a conflict between these two. So one is the royalist side and other is the parliamentarian side. And these women who are identified with this feminism, modern feminism, are all royalists. So this is the odd fact known as English civil wars. So this must be modifying conflict, right? These conflicts must be called English civil wars. Okay, so this is an odd fact that all of these feminist women were royalist. Okay. Since royalist ideology is often associated with a radical patriarchalism. Oh, now I understand why this was an odd fact. So this is an odd fact because these royalist women were feminists, but this royalist ideology is often associated with radical patriarchalism. Patriarchalism means sort of where father is the head, right? So male is the head, and now these women are forerunners of modern feminism. So yeah, this seems to be an odd fact, and now I can understand. Okay, and again, you can see I took a pause here, right? That question was still in my mind, that why that was odd, right? So when I read this, I could see, oh yeah, that explains why that was odd. Okay, since this is often associated with radical patriarchalism of 17th century political theorist, so there is some version of patriarchalism of this guy, Robert Filmer. So these ideologies associated with such patriarchalism, a patriarchalism that equates family and kingdom. Okay, so according to this patriarchalism or this thought process, family is equal to kingdom and asserts the divinely ordained absolute power of the king. So essentially in this, a king has an absolute power and that's divinely ordained. So God has given him, that king, the absolute power. And by analogy of the male head of the household. So this is, you can see parallel to this. So divinely ordained absolute power of the king, divinely ordained absolute power of the male head of the household. So in this patriarchalism, essentially, this male head of the household had an absolute power which was divinely ordained. So this is an extreme kind of patriarchalism, and the royalist ideology was associated with such patriarchalism. So, right, so that's surprising that these women were forerunners of modern feminism, which essentially should be about equality of men and women. Historians have been understandably puzzled by the fact. Okay, I've lost it. So where were we? Since royalist ideology is often associated with radical patriarchalism. Okay. So since this is often associated with radical patriarchalism, historians have been understandably puzzled by the fact that royalist women wrote the earliest extended criticism of the absolute subordination of women in marriage. Right. So if these royalist guys or women actually believed in patriarchalism, why were they criticizing absolute subordination of women in marriage? And they were writing criticism of the okay, they were not writing criticism, they were writing the earliest systematic assertion of women's rational and moral equality. Okay, so there are two things: the criticism of the absolute subordination of women, and they also wrote the earliest assertion, means they are saying, yeah, this is what it is. So they are asserting it, women's rational and moral equality with women, right? So it makes sense. Why are they talking about equality when they are associated with patriarchalism? Yeah, this makes sense that historians are puzzled. Some historians have questioned the Fissile equation. Okay, so some historians are questioning the Fissile equation. Fissile means superficial equation of royalist ideology with Filmarian patriarchalism. Okay, so some historians are saying, yeah, there is no link between royalist ideology and Filmarian patriarchalism. I don't know my pronunciation of this. And indeed there may have been no consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians on issues of family organization and women's political rights. Okay, so the other is saying, yeah, some historians are questioning whether the royalist ideology was really Filmarian patriarchalism, whether they really believed in such kind of patriarchalism. And the other is also saying, yeah, there may not be any consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians on these issues. So royalists may not be really believing a lot in patriarchalism. But in that case, one would expect early feminists to be equally divided between the two sides. Okay, so if there were no consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians, okay, in such a case, right, the early feminists to we would expect them to be equally divided between royalist side and the parliamentarian side, right? That 50% would be royalist, 50% would be parliamentarian. If there are no equal differences, there are no differences between them, then they should be equally likely to become feminists. But the point was that almost all were identified with the royalist side, right? So there is still that problem standing. So let's continue reading. Let me clear this up. Okay. Okay. So Catherine Gallagher, with CG, argues that royalism engendered. So engendered means led to or caused. So this lady probably is arguing that royalism led to feminism. Okay. So this CG is arguing that royalism caused feminism. Wow. So royalism led to feminism because the ideology of absolute monarchy, which was there in royalism, right? Absolute power of the king and of the male head that was there in royalism, provided a transition to an ideology of the absolute self. So CG is now arguing that actually this led to this because this talked about absolute monarchy and that led to absolute self, ideology of absolute self. So somehow that ideology of absolute self was leading to feminism. Okay. She cites the example of the notoriously eccentric author. Okay. So CG, yeah, so that's a lady. CG is citing the example of the notoriously eccentric author MC, Duchess of Newcastle. Okay. So she's citing the example of this author. Now, this author, this lady, claimed to be as ambitious as any woman could be. Okay, so she is very, at least she's claiming to be very ambitious, But knowing that as a woman, she was excluded from the pursuit of power in the real world. So, but she knew that she could not really pursue power in the real world because of, right, there was patriarchalism going on. She resolved to be mistress of her own world. Okay, she resolved to be the head of her own world, the immaterial world that any person can create within her own mind. So basically, she created her own immaterial world in her mind. So she created her own universe. And there she was mistress. She was the head in her own world. Okay. In proclaiming what she called her singularity, singularity means, again, being singular, um, being unique, probably. In proclaiming what she called her singularity, Cavendish insisted that she was a self sufficient being within her mental empire. So she was a self sufficient being. She did not need anybody else. Okay. And she was a center of her own subjective universe. So she was the center, she was self sufficient. So that's a universe that she created in her own mind. And she was not a satellite orbiting a dominant male planet. Right. So in the outside world, probably it was that all females were subordinate to men. And so it's saying that she's not a satellite orbiting a dominant male planet in her universe. So probably in the real world, that's how women were treated, but that's not the case in her own world that she created in her mind. In justifying this absolute singularity, that she was self-sufficient, right? Cavendish repeatedly invoked the model of the absolute monarch. Okay, so this lady that CG is quoting, this Margaret Cavendish, she repeatedly invoked the model of absolute monarch to justify absolute singularity, right? And that's how CG really said that royalism led to feminism, because she justifying her idea of the absolute self by quoting the ideology of absolute monarchy. So she invoked the model of absolute monarch, a figure that became a metaphor for the self-enclosed autonomous nature of the individual person. So this figure became a metaphor for the self-enclosed autonomous nature. So autonomous means self-powered, which is not dependent on anybody else. So it became a metaphor for the autonomous nature. So probably it is leading to that women are also autonomous. They are not dependent on men. That's how probably royalism is leading to feminism. That okay, they started with an absolute monarch, and woman is also an absolute monarch in her own universe. So she is self-sufficient, and that's how she is not dependent on anybody else. And that led to women being equal to men. Okay, now these are the thoughts that I would have, because I'm trying to understand how things are related. These are not explicitly stated, but this is right. This is, I'm not really bringing in outside knowledge. I'm just trying to understand how things are connected. Cavendish successors among early feminists. So this lady's successors among early feminists retained her notion of woman's sovereign self. So they retained her notion of that woman is a sovereign self, is she is independent. But they also sought to break free from the complete political and social isolation that an absolute singularity entailed. Right? If you are completely singular, if you are completely in your own universe, that will lead to political and social isolation. So her successors, even though they retained her idea of woman's sovereign independent self, but they also sought to differ from her in terms of they were more involved politically and socially. So they were not lost in their own words. Right? So this paragraph, if you think about it, is trying to explain that odd fact that why a lot of early feminists were actually royalists. Because according to this person, royalism led to feminism, and that's why a lot of early feminists were royalists, right? Because the first paragraph ended by offering a essentially by saying that this explanation was not really enough. Which explanation? This explanation. So when some historians question the facile equation of royalist ideology with Filmerian patriarchalism, so they are questioning that, yeah, but royalist ideology is not really associated with Filmerian patriarchalism. So it's, you need not be puzzled that how come these guys who believed in patriarchalism ended up being feminists. But even if these guys were not even if these guys did not believe in patriarchalism and there were no consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians, it's still puzzling, right? Why half the feminists were not parliamentarian? Why almost all feminists were royalists? So that puzzle still remain. And now this CG is trying to address that puzzle by saying actually royalism led to feminism in this way. That's explained in the second paragraph. And that explains why a significant majority of the early feminists were royalists. Okay, so with that understanding, I'm going to do a few questions. Let me clear. Okay, let's do the first question. It says the author of the passage refers to Robert Filmer primarily in order to, we know that Robert Filmer, this is where we talk about that person, that his patriarchalism is pretty extreme, right? There was divinely ordained absolute power of the male head of the household, right? And that was puzzling, right? That if royalist ideology was associated with this kind of patriarchalism, then why almost all feminists were royalists? Right? That's how he has been quoted here. Okay, in order to show, he refers to Robert Filmer in order to show that royalist ideology was somewhat more radical than most historians appear to realize. Royalist ideology was more radical than most historians appear to realize. No, no, no. This is, we are not getting into that. That the author is saying, oh, it was actually more radical than the historians think. So this is where the passage never goes. Qualify the claim. Now, qualify, I think people don't really get. Qualify means add reservations to, or present an exception to, or make it less absolute. Okay, it's an, if you say I'm qualifying this claim, you're not supporting that claim. You are sort of adding reservation that this claim is not really uh, as true as it looks like. Okay, so qualifying means going against the claim in some way. So qualify the claim that patriarchalism formed the basis of the royalist ideology. Uh, of course not, right? The author is not really referring to Filmer to say, oh, no, 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 patriarchalism is not really the basis of royalist ideology, right? Rather, Filmer just has been quoted to say that royalist ideology was associated with patriarchalism of Robert Filmer, right? He's not quoting Robert Filmer to either support this claim or go against this claim. This is wrong. Question the view that most early feminists were associated with the royal faction. This is never questioned, right? This is indisputable. That's what the first line says. Highlight an apparent tension between royalist ideology and the ideas of, yeah, of course, right? There is an apparent tension because Robert Filmer patriarchalism is really about absolute power of the male head, and feminists were essentially about, right, equality of men and women. So there is an apparent tension, and that's how, in that context, Robert Filmer has been quoted. Yeah, it's to highlight an apparent tension between royalist ideology, which was associated with Robert Filmer, and the idea of early feminists. So this makes sense. Argue that royalists held conflicting opinions on issues of family organizations and women's political rights. No, 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 no. There is no mention of royalists holding conflicting opinions. Okay, so this is out. Okay, so let's go to the next one then. Let me see. Yeah, let's do the next one. This also seems to be a challenging one. In this now passage suggests which of the following about 17th century English woman mentioned in line 2. Yeah, right. The beginning of the paragraph starts talking about 17th century English women, right, who were feminists, and they were all, almost all were on the royalist side. Okay. Their status as forerunners of modern feminism is not entirely justified. No, not at all. They were forerunners of modern feminism, but we never talk about that. The status is never justified. The passage never gets into that. They did not openly challenge the radical patriarchalism. Um, they did not openly challenge. I think they wrote the earliest extended criticism of absolute subordination, and they also wrote the systematic assertion of equality. Um, so in that way, they are openly challenging to an extent, right? So this also doesn't seem to be right. Cavendish was the first among these women. Never. We are never given that Cavendish was the first among these women to criticize. That's not given to us. We are citing the example of Cavendish, but we're not given that she was the first. Their views on family organization and women's political rights were diametrically opposed to those of both. No. They were not opposed, and they were in any case were on the royalist side, the 17th century English women. And their views are also, I think, quite similar, right? Royalist and parliamentarian. There were no consistent differences on these. So there were essentially similarities between royalists and parliamentarians, and these women were also royalists. So this is not really correct. Historians would be less puzzled if more of them were identified with the parliamentarian side. Yes, right? Because we were expecting, okay, that if there were no consistent differences, then they should be equally divided. The feminists should be equally divided between royalists and parliamentarian. Right now, we have almost all of them on the royalist side. And if more of them were on the parliamentarian side, historians would be less puzzled, right? Because historians are expecting them to be 50-50 split between royalist side and parliamentarian side. So yeah, it makes sense that historians would be less puzzled if more of them were identified with the parliamentarian side. Okay, let's now go to the next one. This seems to be an easy one, so I'm going to skip it. This also seems to be an easy one. Let's do it. Fifth one is also, and sixth one is also difficult. So let's do the third one also. I leave one question then. The passage suggests that Margaret Cavendish's decision to become an author was motivated. So she became an author because she wanted to create her own world, right? That's what we have read. She wanted to sort of be the head in her own world. So that's why she created her own world, and that's how she became an author also, because she could create her own world. She resolved to be a mistress of her own world and as a writer on paper. Okay, justify her support? No, she's not trying to justify her support for the royalist cause. Encourage her reader to works? This is never given that she is encouraging. Persuade other women? No, never given that she is trying to persuade by her writing. Analyze her causes? Uh, she's not really analyzing any causes. Create a world for which you could, over which you could exercise rotor control? Yes, right? This is what we expected. So E is the answer. Let's scroll down. Okay, fourth one. The phrase a satellite orbiting a dominant male planet refers most directly to, essentially, right? I think women were subordinate to men in the real world. And that's what Cavendish did not want. So this is definitely not correct. That Cavendish concept that each woman is a sovereign self, satellite orbiting a dominant male planet is actually opposite to being a sovereign, independent self. The complete political and social isolation. No, no, no. This is not about social isolation. This is about subordination of a female to a male. The material world that a writer, no. This is not about a material world. The absolute subordination of women in a patriarchal society, this is right. And that's how women just remained a satellite orbiting a dominant male planet. The metaphorical figure of the absolute monarch, no, no, no. This is actually opposite. So D is the answer. Let's scroll down. Okay, so what does it say? Which of the following, if true, would most clearly undermine this person's explanation, CG's explanation of the link? Okay, let's first try to take a pause and think. What was the explanation of the link? Right, we were puzzled about this link between royalism and feminism. Why a lot of feminists were royalists, and she essentially had this theory that actually royalism led to feminism, right? So she created a link between or an explanation of this link that royalism led to feminism because royalism led to absolute, the idea of absolute self, because royalism was an idea of an absolute monarch that led to an idea of absolute self. And from there, it went to that every woman is a sovereign self, independent self. So then eventually it led to probably equality of men and women. So now we are trying to look for something that undermines that explanation. That, yeah, this is not the reason, this does not explain why royalism led to feminism. Okay, because of their privileged background, royalist women were generally better educated than were their parliamentarian counterparts. Okay, so it says because of their privileged background, these women were better educated than parliamentarian counterparts. So if they were better educated, so but they in any case believed in patriarchalism, right? If they were better educated, if we say, yeah, if they were better educated, that led to their becoming feminists, but they in any case believed in patriarchalism, right? Even if they were better educated. So how would that undermine the link between royalism and feminism? This does not explain, or this does not weaken that link that royalism led to feminism. Okay, these were coming from a privileged background, they were better educated, but still they were feminists and they were also royalists. So that does not undermine the link between royalism and feminism. Okay, B. Filmer himself had read some of Cavendish early writing. The Filmer was critical, so what? Right? Two people can criticize each other, so that doesn't matter. Cavendish views were highly individual and one not shared by other royalist women who wrote early feminist works. Oh, if they were highly individual and they were not shared by other royalist women, and CG's entire explanation was really about using this example of Cavendish, and that she created her own world in which she was a singularity, right? And if they were highly individual and not shared by other royalist women, then probably this is not how royalism led to feminism. Right? If these views are not shared by other royalist women, then we can't really argue that, yeah, absolute monarchy led to absolute self, led to equality. So this seems to be an answer. The royalist and parliamentarian ideologies were largely in agreement on issues. So this is something we are hinted towards, right? That there were no consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians on family organization and women's political rights. Uh, but how would that question the link between royalism and feminism? So they were an agreement, but in that case, we were expecting half the feminists to be parliamentarians, but that was not the case, right? So that's why we needed an explanation why almost all feminists were royalists. And so we created the explanation. So this fact is not going to challenge that explanation. The royalist side included a sizable minority faction. Sizable minority faction. It was minority, but a sizable minority faction that was opposed to the more radical tendencies. So there was a minority that was opposed to more radical tendency of. So that's fine. So what we are saying is not everybody on the royalist side believed in the radical tendencies of Filmarian patriarchalism. That's fine. But even in that case, let's say all of them did not believe in Filmarian patriarchalism, but still in that case, we would expect half the feminists to be parliamentarians, right? So this is not really challenging this link between royalism and feminism. We still need an explanation. We already have a series explanation between royalism and feminism. So this is not going to challenge that. Let's scroll down now to the last question probably. Okay. The primary purpose of the passage is to trace the historical roots of a modern socio-political movement. We are not really tracing the historical roots. If you think about it, the first paragraph was explaining that odd but indisputable fact. And then towards the end of the first paragraph, we had a partial explanation, which was not satisfactory because even in that case, in this explanation, we were still expecting feminists to be equally divided, but that's not the case. So this explanation was not satisfactory for explaining that why we have that odd fact. So the second paragraph was essentially about explaining that odd fact. So the overall passage is about explaining why that odd fact holds, why a lot of early feminists were royalists. So we're not tracing the historical roots. Present one scholar's explanation. So this is what the second paragraph was about, that presenting one scholar's explanation for a puzzling historical phenomenon. This is what the second paragraph is about, not the first. But in that case, the first paragraph can be understood to be giving a background, right? To really explain what's happening, why the fact is odd, and give a unsatisfactory explanation. And then the second paragraph is about giving that explanation. So this is just about second paragraph, but if we understand first paragraph to be sort of mainly a background for the second paragraph, then we can justify this. Okay, so let's keep this on hold. Contrast to interpretations of the ideological origins. Two interpretations of the origins. Are we giving two interpretations of the origins of a conflict? Are we talking about a political conflict? So this is completely off. No political conflict, no idea of origin. Establish a link between the ideology of an influential political theorist. Okay, who is a political theorist here? Establish a link between the ideology of an influential political theorist and that of a notoriously eccentric writer. Notoriously eccentric writer is Margaret Cavendish. Establish a link between the ideology of an influential political theorist. Was that Filmer? Influential political theorist? Yeah, that was Robert Filmer. So it's essentially saying establish a link between ideology of Robert Filmer and ideology of... No, we are not. Cavendish is just an example to explain how royalism led to feminism. We are not, the purpose of the paragraph is not really establish a link between the ideology of Robert Filmer and ideology of Margaret Cavendish. That's wrong. Call attention to some points of agreement between opposing sides. No, we are just not just trying to say, yeah, there were some points of agreement. It's not the whole purpose of the paragraph. So the answer is B. Right now, pay attention. Option B, some people may reject by saying, yeah, it's just about the second paragraph, but this indeed is the answer, right? Because in this context, we can really see, we can understand first paragraph to be just giving a background for the second paragraph in some way, right? In any case, I would also have some hesitation in accepting B, frankly. But given that all other options are completely out, option B is the only credible one there. Okay, so I think we are done. So I hope you gained something out of this passage analysis. Let me know how it went for you. Thank you.